presentation the last week, and now he is so kind to share his opinion on the European culture. Culture in Europe, does culture unite or split Europe? Please, Martin.
Thank you. This is really an experience I never had before, because normally when I do a lecture or something like that, I speak on things I really understand or where I do research myself. But Luba insisted, so I accept her topic. And I hope I don't have nonsense now. So be a little bit patient, that there might be some shortcomings in the presentation, and then when you see these shortcomings, let's have as much as possible a good discussion. Does culture unite or split Europe? My first approach, I do it in several steps. My first approach. Luba Alexandrova Fadeva starts in her question with a singular of culture. But is there just one uniform culture in Europe? Is Europe not a wonderful and colorful picture of very different cultures? If we start by a singular, then we make already a strong hypothesis that can't work at the end. Should we therefore perhaps ask if the various cultures unite or split Europe? But also Europe is questionable. What is meant? The so-called continent, that is not much more than a peninsula to the Asian continent? Or is Europe just the European Union? What then with Iceland, that just refused to go on with the process of becoming a member state of the European Union? What means that for Norway, where twice the vote of the people rejected to become part of the European Union? With Switzerland? What? With Russia in this understanding? What? Belarus, Moldavia, Georgia, Armenia, the Ukraine? It's still not easy to become a member state of the Union. Macedonia got now, it was last week, third time the okay by the responsible commission, but up to now did not become a member state. Montenegro got the best notes of the states who are asking for it to become a member, followed surprisingly by Serbia. But the hope for Bosnia-Herzegovina, for Kosovo, for Albania, even for Turkey, is far from reality in the moment. And there were moments where refused candidates used the argument of culture to question the decision for the refusal, like Turkey. When Prime Minister Yilmaz called Europe a Christian club. That is by far nonsense, but understandable if you realize the religious background in Turkey, where Islam became more and more decisive also in politics the last years. So the arguments against Europe and the European Union tells us most of the time much more about those who did the argument than about the European Union. For me, Europe is Europe from Iceland to the Ural, from Spitsbergen to Malta or Cyprus. Political unions, how successfully they might be, can't change a geographical idea and they can't change so easily the involved cultures. But there again we have to differentiate. Yes, Europe is a space for a lot of cultures. These cultures are much more than just the nations. In nearly every country we have also cultures of minorities, ethnic or religious groups, migrants, who are different from the culture of the majority. Going for Europe as a goal means to start by diversity, not by unity. The idea is to find common ground and common goals for different and diverse cultures, states, societies, ethnical and religious identities. Not the other way around. Unity is something that is never given, but has all the time to be struggled for. Europe is not a state like Japan. It is diverse, a vibrant space of ongoing changes, changes that often are more cultural changes than political or social ones. Second approach. Culture is a construction. How we eat and drink, how we do music or write books, how we build houses, how we organize the public sphere as well as the private sphere. This shows our culture. I'm a European because I was born in Europe. It was not my choice, like for a lot of migrants that are coming to Europe because they gave up their hope that the countries of their origin might change to human rights, freedom of opinion also in the public, religious freedom, minority protection. A lot of them are going not to the next safe place, but to Europe. Because they hope there are those values working they never could experience in their reality. And a lot of them think like these well-known Lebanese metropolitan George Goda, that these values are not Western values, but human values. If we see so Europe from outside of Europe, and for what is significant and it might stand for, then yes, then there is something like a European culture. Then there are shared values all over Europe, shared, partially, cultural heritages, where human beings are respected as human beings, where different ideas of freedom came up, from Luther to the French Revolution, where countries learned by World War II how important it is to find a common ground, a way for a better understanding and a sustainable peacemaking. Searching for a unity where it is possible and for differentiation where it is in need and makes life colorful. The core of this set of values is not that big, but these values create an invisible space and border for what Europe is or not in this sense. Yes, in this sense, culture split Europe. A country where the basic rights are not respected should not be accepted as the member state of the European Union. In all discussions around the question if a state can become a member state of the European Union, this is a cardinal point. Is there really an independent legislative? Is there the will to accept minorities that are not accepted by the moral standards of the majority? The Sinti and the Roma in Romania and Slovakia are such an ongoing field of contradictions. Sexual minorities, how much migrants can be accepted and integrated. Democracy in this context is not seen by election of governments, but by the fact how a government has to quit and give the power to the opposition. Where this is not working, there is no real democracy. Values are never just given and fixed. They need an ongoing public discourse to be defended, developed, or to be lost. The Muslim minorities' questions in the last years indicate a whole set of values in the European societies. And cultural people who want that the values that are reached in the European Union should stay have to fight for. And as open as you might be, you need limits for things that are in contradiction to the basic needs of human beings. The field of terrorism was such a discussion field the last years. The openness for historical truths against hero history that denies the dark part of its own history, like Turkey and the Armenian genocide. These hero histories are normally just ideological constructions to save the power for some. Europe might have started in the past because of economical reasons for France and Germany. It might have found its way for military actions besides the NATO. But the mentally heart of Europe is a cultural one. Third approach. So we have both a yes and a no. In Russian history, you can learn that it can create pogroms and wars when one understanding of culture wants to be the only and exclusive one. How much Byzantium, how much Greek is in Russia? All believers did not want to agree to the reforms of Patriarch Nikon. Slavophiles and people looking to the West stand in contradiction. The European Union came to being when the empires in Europe came to an end. And the UK, France, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, and at the end also Portugal, very late, had to learn how to be without their empires. And some of these countries struggle up to today with the consequences. How much they feel responsible for former colonies. How much immigrants from their former colonies they can accept. And just to mention this, the solutions of the European Union for the last remains of the empires in overseas are different. Perhaps you don't know it, but just to mention it, for example, the island of Mayotte or French Guiana and some of the islands in the Pacific Oceans are part of the European Union because they are French overseas departments, so they are all included in the European Union. Mayotte is an island close to Madagascar and the Comoros in the Indian Ocean in Africa, but everyone there is a member of the European Union. The British did the opposite. The British did not include the remaining parts of their empire into the European Union. So if you're in St. Helena or the Falklands or Tristan da Cunha or even St. Pitcairn or Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, you are not a member of the European Union. And the third way was what the Dutch did. They let decide the people in the islands themselves. So some of the Dutch former colonies in the Caribbean, they are now towns of the Netherlands and also members of the European Union. Just to mention that. And I think this makes the thing for Russia much more, the question of empire and how one came out of being an empire, much more difficult because Russia has another way of conquering the East and becoming an empire than the West European countries had. So, European culture was always fluid. When it was fixed by totalitarian systems, Napoleon tried it, Hitler tried it. There are some portions I would think that we have to think about Stalin in this line. Then it became worse. Tensions started, state terror grew, wars were brought into being because these wars were instrumental for separation, for an exclusive way of understanding, especially for our German case. Where one culture thought it must be healing the others, or when one culture was so weak in itself that there was no way for it than to dominate the other cultures, because it was not ready for an ongoing discourse face to face to find a way for all. When cultural identities are defined in an exclusive way and presses others to accept, to be dominated by it, then they not just exclude others, then they, as Ami Malouf, a Lebanese Protestant with an Orthodox family background and an Arabic writer, who is aware that this means also to accept the Muslim component of the Arabic culture, then they create murderers. Because where the culture of a majority is so weak that it must oppress the culture of minorities, there is no way out to defend the minority culture than to start into terrorism, aggression, or inner separation and integration away from the dominating cultural state. It is, in a way, a success story that a lot of the violent tensions between majorities and minorities were brought to solutions of coexistence. For example, for the Danish minority in Germany, or the Germans in Italy, in South Tyrol, who can play an important role for the whole country, much more important than the percentage of the Germans in the population in Italy would normally allow. In a lot of fields, this process is still ongoing. In UK for Northern Ireland and Scotland, for example, in Spain for the Basques, in France for the Bretons and the people from Corsica, for the Russians in the Baltic states, the Hungarians in Slovakia and Romania. It's a demanding way, and big portions in the European societies are still not really ready for this. But in the framework of their membership to the European Union, responsible persons carry on in these countries the need for the new standards to overcome oppression in the society and go into a little coexistence, into real coexistence. in the end, hopefully face to face. You can't do politics for minorities. You can't do politics for minorities when you don't do this politics together with the minorities. You can't find cultural values for all if you don't involve all, at least if you want to get something that is sustainable. Even if democracy must be done by people who are not afraid of being different from the majority and free of and corrupting we. It has to win. It has to win the people for responsibility for all human beings in the society. So cultures have to agree to the process of change of cultures to create responsibility for all. Otherwise, it leads to cultural totalitarianism. Fourth approach. That's something like a personal footnote. As I said, I was born in Europe. But I'm a European just by birth. No. To be a European means to be aware of the cultural heritage, the often not peaceful changes for cultures in the past, to know what are the values that are running Europe. It is, at the end, a choice. A choice to be European when you are not in innocent dreams of a child anymore. When we learn about Celtic culture or Roman culture or Greek culture and how they disappeared, we see how they could not manage the multiculturality at the end. Who wants to learn from the historical processes must learn to differentiate what brings the values from one culture to another culture or other cultural backgrounds, that will carry on the process without ignoring or denying the cultures that brought those values after long struggles into being. Of course, cultures divide. When I came these days to Perm, I had to realize that there is no taxi point where I can pick up a taxi on the street somewhere. That there is no public phone, that the knowledge of English is often limited, and that limits my approach to the people in the supermarket or wherever I met the people. And then it was not satisfying for communication. I observed the way of life of the families in my home here and saw there are very different things in this society from my society. Cultures are different. But when I listened to the sound of the tram, pictures from the past came up in me. I saw the tram in the movie Dr. Zhivago that impressed me in my youth. And even if no one seems to take care of the wonderful old, sometimes wooden houses in the town, they helped me to find the shadow of the world of Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Soloviev, and whomever I read when I was young. In my imagination, at least, Russia was present in my whole life. More than many other countries. Yes, it lost perhaps portions of its soul. But for me, going to these places, I saw, in a way, they are still there. So, to my cultural background, like for most of the Europeans, belong to Russian literature, Russian music, Russian philosophy, Russian religion, at least as an imagination, where the process can start to finish and lose, to find, to discover, and to give up. Culture can split and unite. I know that, you know that, everyone knows it. It is in our hands where we make it instrumental to. Imaginations are in need, otherwise no one of us can live. There was a mistake of the post-colonial studies during the last decades because they did not figure out this and proclaimed a hypermoral instead that never can be reached. My pictures of Russia might be wrong. Your pictures of Europe might be wrong. Doesn't mind. The point is, do I know that human beings need to construct every day, even if they know the limits of their constructions? This is one of the most important cultural turning points. If we are not able to figure that out, then we are going to be lost in restrictions, totalitarian cultural ideas and behaviors, discrimination of others, feeling as elitarianism. To fight for the values, I am convinced that I must fight for means to give the opponent an open voice, to listen to his views, understand his values. Wars and tension shows always the absence of understanding of a balanced face-to-face dialogue and are symbols for a given-up dialogue. If we are looking for a peaceful world beside the political needs of the day, then we are looking besides the carefully observed differentiations to the common ground that we might be able to find. It's our decision if we are running our cultures as something that splits or as something that unites. It's our duty, no one else. We can honor French Revolution in its limits. We can listen to Beethoven as a European or worldwide hymn. We can learn expressions of human life, every self-reflective literature. We can enjoy food that is not our traditional food. We love to be with others in their cultures because they give us a mirror for our own culture. A mirror for our own cultural heritage. Helps to correct and become stronger in my cultural heritage. That is coming from the past, but not binding to, because it learned to be aware of what is in need for all and not just for me. The last approach. I'm in time. I am not you, and you are not me. But I can see something in your life which appears to be something from my life. And furthermore, I explore what unifies you and me. You and me, we both struggle for survival, a better life, happiness. Can I face you in a manner that I am allowed to learn from you so that I can absorb what belongs to you and not to me? Can I overcome our differences toward what unifies you and me without neglecting our respective characters? how can I preserve the new that arises when I have to combine two cultures in one identity? For example, if I'm a Turkish Muslim in Germany or an Oriental Christian in the Islamic world, can I only understand the other if I convert to his or her religion or culture? What happens to me after this conversion when I come back with a new perspective to my own position? Do I have to reconvert? Are patchwork identities the only thing possible? How we can preserve the respective individualities and yet be open for a deeper understanding of the other? Freedom, love, justice, equality. These are keywords that are never definitely defined but always in flow, proved in life. They are always illusion and yet reality. Religion and culture can shape the meaning of these values, but also have to match themselves with them. I would answer when there are people living for a longer time in a society and you took some of the customs for their own, even if you have in Russia a lot of ethnic groups speaking mainly or firstly Russian. Yes, they are not just intercultural on two sides, they are transcultural. They take it into what unifies it for themselves. Of course, they are not completely transcultural. They are also intercultural, bi or polycultural, hybrid, often highly particularistic, sometimes multicultural. When the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, speaking to the Turks in Germany, declared the assimilation as a crime against humanity, or when German politicians announced that this country has reached the limits of integration, these statements demonstrate human shortcomings which result from particular interests. They say, however, nothing about the potential for transcultural existence, which transcends the very particular interests and focuses on those aspects which are common for all people. Is Europe already as senile as thinking and acting only in its own interest, regardless of its responsibility for the world? Does Europe lack visions and ideas for its future, so that it settles for doing only the least manageable things? Transcultural existence does not mean an existing beyond all cultural peculiarities, as the critics say. It is more like a passage through all particularism and an interaction toward a common ground or a common aim. Firstly, with a look on the region or place where we live. Secondly, with a look on the entire globe. Transcultural existence is not a vision, nothing that politics is supposed to bring about. Rather, it is a reality that has always been noticeable in human life. In any case, when concepts of theories claim to universally explain reality, their inventors are certainly blind to the richness and fullness of life and world. In contrast, the concept of transculturality adheres to the single and united reality of all humans, which are probably not achievable at all, yet always effective. Transculturality is never simply given, but always effective when there is a possibility to evolve. One author who thought and wrote about these issues with deep insight was one of my favorite thinkers, Albert Schweitzer. He coined a phrase that I think is as profound as it is simple. I'm life that wants to live among life that wants to live. Is this idealistic? I don't mind. For I think it is above all this human and visionary and beneficial for the shaping of Europe's and the world's future. Thank you very much.
Now we have time for questions and some remarks for discussion.
Ask whatever you want to like to ask. Feel free. I will try to answer whatever you ask.
Professor, what part of Europe are you from?
From Germany?
Germany.
The north of Germany, yes.
Good.
So it's called Lower Saxony, and it's a typical North German part of Germany, where the people in the past spoke another language than German. So I grew up not in German, but in this old German language there. It's the first language I had to learn was German. And my old language was much more close to English, because it has the same grammar and historical reasons. Some tribes from my region went over to England, conquered England, and made this Anglo-Saxon culture, well, later on mixed with the French, when the French entered the same region. But that's the reason why we are so close to each other.
Going off of what you said about transculturalization, and that it seems to be a constant throughout human existence, would it then be kind of almost counter then to ascribe to a specific culture? Because if transculturalization has happened so much, a Greek person is not really a Greek person, but the mixture of what other cultures came before that to create Greek. And a German person would not be a German really, but the product of the mixture of whatever happened before that, like you just said, those cultures that created modern German culture. So then, I guess, would it not be more important than to ascribe to an individual identity as a forefront, instead of maybe losing oneself inside of that culture of that moment, I should say, I mean, historically speaking?
Yes, two answers. You can't build up political institutions like the European Union also by individualistic ideas. You can have your individual identity, but in Germany we are 85 million people, so we have to see what unifies these 85 million people in such a small space of country, how we can develop it in a way that we are not coming into tensions or whatever. And identity, even on that level, individual level, has to take care of the identities of the others, because if you're very convinced by you yourself, it might be very few space left for the next person next to you. So that's for the individual level. I think it will not work for just some ideas of this would work for nations and state and bigger organizations. The other thing is this open discourse. So I tried to explain this discourse. You can't go into such a dialogue if you don't have a German identity or a French identity or a British identity. You are not a partner anymore if you don't have any such cultural identity. Might be you can jump to the European ones, but I see this on a different level. So it's clear if I'm going into dialogue with the French to see what means for the French thinkers the idea of freedom, equality, and to be present, and what means the German idea of freedom coming up by Luther and later on Kant and those people. It's very different, very different. Even the thinkers in both philosophies in France, the thinkers of Enlightenment, and in Germany the thinkers of Enlightenment are it's not easy to find a bridge between.
Do you not think that they're becoming more and more homogenized now because, I guess just because of the internet and stuff like that, we can share ideas more readily now, so what would have been a Russian idea 100 years ago that would have been identified strictly as Russian, or maybe a Syrian idea?
I was not finished, but
sorry.
No problem. Perhaps I jump to this already. No, the reality is that these ideas are very little, and it was a surprise by those who tried decades ago already to come to a European government in a way. It was in Germany, especially Gerhard Schröder, who had the idea we need now a foreign minister for the European Union. It was a failure. It was totally against the nature of the European nations. This can't be the way for Europe. This is a way a little bit linked to France and centralism, a little bit linked to the US, whereas also some federal elements, but very strong centralism with the president in both countries. But it's not the European case, and especially not the German case, because in Germany we learned after World War II that it is impossible to accept again a centralistic president. With Hitler, this thing is over for German history. We never will accept a centralistic government in that way anymore. So it's clear for Germany, it was clear that we have to be a federal state, and that we have a big variety of characters. In Bavaria, you live very different from the region where I'm living. And you have very different customs of how to eat, and even your language. If you learn German, precise German, you would have no problems in my region. But if you stay in a deep Bavarian village, I'm sure you don't understand one word. Because this is a different way of culture. And the politicians who had the idea, we create there something, these ideas were not bound to the will of the population, to the people. And those countries who refused to become a member of the European Union were very much afraid of this. They had this feeling, might it be right or not, if they go into the European Union, then they will be brought to things they don't want. And we are happy that normally in the European Union, these things are organized by popular votes, by elections and whatever, so this normally can't happen. So whenever someone creates the stereotype that Europe wants to win other nations to go in its European way, it's more telling about those persons who show these stereotypes in the public, because it shows their fear and what they don't want and where they are afraid of, but it shows nothing about Europe. The other thing, when you get this point at the beginning, that we, from the very beginning, have already more than just one closed identity. We bring in, for example, when you are baptized, might be a small portion, but there will be the Orient in you. Otherwise you can't imagine what was in Jerusalem, in Galilee or whatever. Then you will make all the Orient to Russia or Germany or whatever. And they did it a long time, not knowing that the Orient is the Orient and not their imaginations of what it might be. So when you do it seriously, and that is just one point, it's also the question of the French Revolution you mentioned, then this is working as an independent thing in you yourself. So then you already belong for a part of yourself, not just to Europe, but also to another space. For the French Revolution, I will do it very short, but I can't think of any European country in the moment that is not going into the reception of the French Revolution in the one or the other way around, refusing, anticipating, or participating in the idea. You have to have an understanding of what this way of freedom and equality and to be present means for your society where you are in. You then can choose another way, as the Germans did. The Germans don't agree to the French way, but they had good reasons, and they developed in another idea of what is freedom to them than the French did. So the idea of freedom in Germany is not this unlimited idea they had in the beginning, especially Robespierre, in contradiction to Danton, but it is this more limited idea. So the idea of Luther is you're becoming totally free there, but then you have to serve through the love. So you are becoming free because you are free to love. And this is not the French way, of course not. But this is, you see, a very different way to understand what freedom means. I have no idea what Russians would think about freedom and how they would define it, because I never was reading Russian texts on freedom. But for Europeans, I can say there is no country, even Russia in the past not, where it's not a reception or anticipation or participation in the French Revolution. So you need to find your position facing this idea. That's also for other things. Is that already enough?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
One more question for you. Professor, I have a question for you. Do you think there's such a thing as European identity?
Yes.
There is.
Yes. I for a long time in my life, I refused it. I must confess, I refused it. I thought Europe, that's something like an organization for interests we organize together. But as more as I was involved for the question of values and to defend values that I think that there are indeed, even in my society itself now, but also outside, I understood, yes, there is something special in Europe. I never found it somewhere else in the world, not in China, not in Japan, not in India, in the Arab countries, wherever I taught, in the US. No one of the other countries has this special set of values that grew up in the heart of Europe. And there are special conditions why they grew up. The main thing is World War II. World War II changed Europe totally.
And what are those values?
Sorry?
The values, you keep talking about the
Yes,
values.
I think
What
it
are
started with this value, how to treat minorities. Our experience in the German case, as you perhaps know, we have also other experiences, was the case with the Jews. And we had no choice, or our grandfathers had no choice after World War II, just to agree that they did it wrong or to ignore it and to create a new life. And they, under oppression in the first time, it was not their free will, but they came more and more to the idea, yes, we have to have another way to handle the minorities. That was the reason why in the German constitution there's a right for everyone in this world who is persecuted to go to Germany. And he must be accepted if he can prove that he is persecuted. And I'm proud of this paragraph. A lot of people are unhappy with this because the world is full of wars and tension in the moment, and we will not be able to bring all of them to Germany for this thing. But it's good to have this paragraph there because it shows what we learned by our lesson in history. So the minority question is a very tricky question. For example, in the US, you are from the US or you are from?
Yeah.
Yes, because it sounds like that. From the US, it's different. They learned it sometimes, step by step. For example, the movement of Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement. But it was a long and suffering way for the blacks to become recognized. And they still have problems with the Hispanics. It's an ongoing debate if Obama's decision that they can stay will be accepted for the time after Obama or not. We have no idea. And up to today, they don't really rewrite the history to the people who lived there before they came to North America. They just give reservations to the few Indians that survived this, I would say, genocide. But American history, in this case, is much more far away from this knowledge of how to take care of minorities than those European countries who came through World War II, because we have good reasons to be there much more aware. And so I can continue the questions of, yes, the question of public opinion. This is for our case, it's very decisive. In 1933, when Hitler took over the government, one of the first things was to bring the free newspapers out of being and to bring the media in his control. And he did it in this very enthusiastic way, so the people were attracted, whatever they told later on, but it was clear the majority of the Germans liked it. And a free press, free media, would have given a voice for the opposition. The only way for the opposition was then later on to try to kill him or to do something where they have to die. They know that they would die for that, or to immigrate. They had no space anymore in this society to clearly say what they want. If the majority accepts these opinions or not, that's not the case. But that the discourse must be there, that's the case. A society where the discourse between different opinions is not open, is not done in the public sphere. This society is a society of oppression. And so we have to encourage the people to be able to do dialogue and discourse, not to flee away, because when you oppress or flee away or ignore things, then you are weak. The reality is you are very weak. And the only way to encourage you to become stronger is that you do it face to face and learn how to convince the other people by your arguments. If you don't have convincing arguments, then it might be, I'm sorry to say this, if this is the case, then it might be you are wrong. But when you are convinced by your opinions and convinced by the values you are staying for in your life, then you are able to fight for it, because you have good reasons. Might be the reasons will come also in the dialogue, because that's always a funny thing. I was not born for dialogue, but when I started to do dialogue, even with Muslim fundamentalists in the Orient, it's always at the end enriching me. I'm not losing something. Sometimes it's stupid, because it's just playing like a game. I show you how powerful I am, he shows me how powerful he is. But if it's not just a game, then there is coming out something what you did not experience before, what you did not expect. And so I think a society that wants to be fit for the future, they must learn to do things like that. All societies I know who are not fit for these things disappeared in the history. The Roman Empire was powerful, but they were not able to have this dialogue with the Germanic tribes, and the Gotian tribes came into the empire. They had no dialogue. They just were convinced they are, we have the best knowledge, they are just barbarians. And all the texts of the Romans about these people are barbarians, no culture, no literature, not real language, and whatever. It was a big mistake. And when they became aware of that, it was too late. Then the barbarians took over already what they wanted to solve. No, you have to start early. There are always people who will replace us, and it's okay, because that's history. But the question of the values is our task. If we can bring it to the people who are different from us to accept these values, or if we can discover ways that they have it in a way already in themselves and must develop it more, then the thing is done. But if we don't do it, what should these people do? These strange people who feel themselves better than I? That gives me no good feeling, and that gives me no really voice, and that gives me no opportunity to fight for myself and my culture, then going into clash. So, sorry.
No, so
But these are the values I think we are standing for.
so I'm a student at the University of Montana Western in the United States, in Dillon, Montana, and I'm in the education department studying to become an elementary teacher. And what is stressed over and over again to us is the importance of knowing our students and representing them in our classroom in everything that we present to them, so that if there's any differences, which there are many, obviously, in the United States, that they feel comfortable and feel respected. And again, this is the most important thing that you speak of to me, is finding our our similarities and our respect for each other, and starting young. In Montana, it's mandatory for the curriculum of this elementary and secondary education too, to teach the Native American inclusion in our curriculum.
Yes. We don't have it in that way, but we do more or less the same things. The thing for me always is not just a question of the planned education, it's more the question of me myself, because I often see that I myself think that I'm in the situation that I know what should come out, and to bring me back to the position that this is not a closed thing, it's also for me an open thing, gives the other the possibility to show his way. So persons who for me sometimes, even when I was teaching in America, I taught several times in the US, even when I was teaching there, there are some people very proud of themselves, very convinced that they have what is in need, and not to hurt them, but to help them to see that this is just a lack of understanding of themselves. It's not so easy. So one of my main problems in Germany is I have very much too much students. So if I have in a seminar 60 students, I know I can't do it, even if I want. And I do it just theoretically, and I know because I was working 3 years in a jail and 6 years in an orphanage, I know it can't be done by theories. I can teach them books, and they have some ideas, but the reality must come where I am. So the point, and to find the point where a student really is in his ideas and in his wishes, and where he takes his time for, is not so easy when you have so much students. And
That's true.
So there are sometimes our best ideas becoming too artificial, and how to escape from there, I'm not so sure what we can do. You're right, we have to teach them all of these things, but I'm not sure what we get out by only teaching them. So, but it's something I think everyone who knows the life at a university knows that these things you can't manage. They are coming or they are coming not.
Right. So then the other point is you're traveling to these different locations, which is your travel and your stay in Russia, and you're finding out the similarities and the differences between the areas and being able to make these connections. So the 8 of us who have traveled here to Russia, and the fortune that we've had of coming here and seeing this firsthand, and trying to promote other people to travel to different locations to see these similarities, I think is the best way possible.
So that was one of the decisions to change my curriculum. When I discovered this, first thing, very simple thing was I do every semester a 1-day excursion and go mainly to refugee camps also, where people are totally different, are totally helpless, are totally not accustomed to the German way of life. And the second thing I do is every single semester, and it's really hard work for me, every single semester I take a big group of 12 students or so to go for a week or 2 weeks to India or to the US or Egypt. Just before I came to Burma, I was in Egypt, or go next way, semester I will be in Armenia, and semester following I will be in Iran. So, because how to find a way for students, especially for these regions, to see that the reality is different from what the media tells them.
Exactly.
The only way is to bring them there, to experience interaction, to speak with the people, to see how it really works and where are really the tensions. That means no solution, but it means when you are coming back, you have another feeling. And your approach is different from the approach I taught you half a year before we are going. I have the almost attended the seminar half a year before, but this is just theory. And then when you are there, you must find your way to an Arabian souk. That's, you know, this Arab market. Boom. Most of my students are lost then. And it's a part of your experience the need to see how this other culture really works. Even if at the end might be you agree to the report of the media, because at the end might be things from your background are more important than the things you saw, or you judge the things you saw already by what you have already in mind. But it's one of the ways. So I encourage, that's also a reason to be in this project, I encourage students and even professors to exchange as much as possible, to go into partnerships. To be in Russia here, it's for me really luck. When I took it over the project, I thought, oh, again, a project, and just because one of my colleagues were not really aware of what is in need. But when I then really did it, then all these things came. The Ukraine came, this wonderful creating of stereotypes on both sides. It's going on like in the garden. Every corner is growing such a stereotype flower. Yes, it's the right time. It's the only time where we can encourage the students to see from both sides that what is going on is not the reality, but it's imagination. It's understandable processes, but nothing they should agree too much to. Sorry.
No, it sounds like they're very fortunate to have you part of the university.
You have the same thing as we had in Germany, but stronger. I think you have a lot of things to solve in American policy in the moment. So we must not speak about that, but I think in American policy in the moment are a lot of things. What makes me a little bit afraid what will be the future of the US. A special group in one of your leading parties is if these people would be able to win a president or so, I have no idea how I, as a German or a European, should interact with you. I have no idea. I just saw a video the last days. I showed it to some of my colleagues. I think I did not send it to some of my Russian colleagues because it's not fair. But it was really very unfair against Germany and the Russians. It was a think tank, and the man in Washington who was interviewed said the main question is, and the main problem, the question how Germany will go with Russia or not.
Well, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, the main question is if Germany is going with Russia or not. And then he said, we fought 100 years against this coalition, and if this will be the result of this time, then it's worse. So America has to fight. And he encouraged himself for some of the fights he is going on. And to listen to that, in the first moment I thought, oh, might be covered. And it can't be real, it can't be real. But then I listened more and more and I said, how it's possible, how it's possible. And I think this is because the new development on your, I don't say which group in which party I mean, this doesn't work. This is a splendid isolation, this is elitarianism in a way that is distracting every nation of the world who is not like the Americans. And that's not my vision of the world. My vision of the world is very different.
Right, so then it's to go back to what you said, you'll have to come back to America and just stay with the people, not the politicians.
Yes, I do.
And realize that,
yes.
Oh yes, Americans are okay because...
But I do. I did not say it against the Americans. And it's the same thing with the Russians or with the Germans. When I first did my trips to the Orient, I traveled to the Orient every year for some weeks. So I feel very much at home in the Arab countries. And when I first went there in the 70s, and the people started to thought that they were doing me a pleasure, explaining me how right Hitler did his thing. That was not easy. And it was very difficult to explain them that this might be a disputable idea about what Germans are. These crazy picture Germans are always strong, iron, punctual, whatever. Maybe we have some portions and we admire sometimes those things, but we are not. And Americans are not, and Russians are not, and Polish people are not, French people are not. I know no nation in this world where these stereotypes really work. Only in our imagination, and these imaginations mainly have to do with what we want to be ourselves. And sometimes those who admire these strategies to feel bigger than they are. We have a very bad story by this in the German history, not to come to other histories, but before World War I, the intellectuals and the German culture was thinking very much too big about Germany. So we had this idea, the whole world can be healed by the Germans in the German idea. Am deutschen Wesen wird die Welt genesen. No explanation, it was a saying by a German poet, Galvin. It was really disastrous because when the Germans then came into reality, because they lost World War I, and the reality was very different from what they thought, that the German Empire would be strong military, a lot of marines, showing the British that they are second hand or whatever. And then they were not able to go through the distress, to the things they had after World War I. They were not able to cope with the new situation. They just want to go back. They just want to have this idealistic view of themselves back instead of training themselves to accept the reality. And this is a problem for a lot of big nations, or big nations that have a big history. How to bring our nations with such a history to the point that they think about themselves just as a part of the world, just as a stone in the mosaic, and not as 3 or 4 times of the ego that they should have. Because if you like it or not, when you think in this big way of you yourself, you pressure other people. But you don't realize it. But the reality is because there is no space left. Every time there is someone who is your next. So sorry for this.
No,
but I like to be in the US, so that just for this thing. And I really, one of my eldest friends is a really very critical colleague in Washington DC, at Catholic University there. And he is a wonderful thinker of free way thinking without devoting himself to sometimes for a European looking to the US, a game or a show instead of real politics. And there is a problem for Europeans, and there is also a problem for a lot of US people I met, because they really don't know whom you can trust. You really do what you want with your vote that is coming into being. And I can understand them, and I trust that these people one day will bring this problem out of being. Might be a long time.
I hope so.
Last week, when we discussed the problem of European identity, I asked my students to answer questions about the Charlie Hebdo case and how it's possible to analyze is the reaction of society in Europe more argument in honor of the existence of European identity, or just the some evidence of split society? Because you are specialist in confessional here, and you know
No,
so what is the
And it was really the point when I were in Egypt. So when I were in Egypt, it was the moment when they killed the 21 Copts in Libya. And so I had some official things to do in Cairo, and the 2 days I was used by the television. And exactly this question came up. What do you think about Paris? And they compared, that's in the Egyptian case, they compared their situation with Paris. At first we'll say there's a big difference between the normal German way to think about that and the normal French way to think about that. For French people, the idea that came up in the French Revolution is the idea of freedom really of any opinion. So you must be very crazy in your opinions that the law is going against you. So freedom of opinion in France means more or less you even can attack and insult others without having the fear that you must stay for what you said. And that's not the German case. Where really it's working totally different from there. And the situation in France is after the 18th century, slowly, but in the end, very clear, France became a state more or less led by secularists. So the idea is the state in France, there is no religion. Religion is private sphere, has nothing to do in the public sphere. So if religion interferes and wants to have laws or want to have whatever, want to have protection, in this case, the French state must refuse. Otherwise he will be not with his original idea of freedom of opinion. In Germany it's different. In Germany we still have a law that forbids, for example, to insult the religious meaning of others. You can discuss with them, but it's not allowed to tell, like the caricatures, that was the reason for the thing in Paris. Yes, these people killed persons, but what was going on in the caricatures before was also an aggression. And it is not possible in France to judge the people for this aggression, because it's just on paper, it's just blaming these stupid Muslims and these stupid prophet and whatever. And in Germany we decided, because of our things 1933 to 1945, that this will be punished by law. So very often the Germans don't do it, but if they have the feeling that there is a religious group coming under pressure by people who don't respect the other way of the others, then we will be punished by this specific paragraph. It's not to give religion more importance than secular people. No, Germany is a secular state, no question. But it's to protect other way of being and living and of self-understanding than those who might define themselves as secularists. Even secularism for me is also religion. It's not so difficult, not so different. So you see these both things working very different, and that was very helpful in the TV, in the 45 minutes interviews they did with me, because for the Egyptians, in the moment, as for most of the Muslim countries, they are not able to have a real secular society. That's by far not their reality. So in Egypt, as well as in the other countries, you have to look, is there a way that you respect the religious feeling of the people, but also give the space for real freedom and how it can work. And it might be, I'm not sure, but it might be that the German model has some points that they could take into account for the society. And what was interesting for me in the French discourse after the thing in Paris, that one of the first statements by one of the ministers in the government was, yes, we need to change our policy towards religion. That was new, and I'm not convinced that the French can do it because of the tradition. It's a very strong tradition. But at least they realized something in our society we are proud of is oppressing others, is really hurting others, is really doing damage to our society. And now France has to find a way. I am not in France, so I can't help them. I don't know where they will go to, but I see, if you compare the German and the French model, in this case, I would choose the German one. The other one is idealistic. It's giving not space for people who are slower, who are different, who are whatever, than what you want that is coming into being.
Professor, let me ask you a question. Back to the question of identity, which I think is very, very important. You see in Britain a big movement
Yes.
to get out of Europe.
Yes.
Iceland said no. Greece is on the verge of saying goodbye or being kicked out. Spain, very strong movement. Marine Le Pen is gaining.
Everywhere.
So you still think there's going to be a Europe in the next 5 minutes, or never mind 5 minutes, for the next 10 months?
Yes, Europe will be, if there is a European
United
Union or not.
Yeah.
The question is not the European Union and what will be with the European Union if there is one more or less or so. I have no idea why now for the third time they did not accept Macedonia, because Macedonia did it very well all the last years. There's no reason anymore. But it seems that they are afraid of enlarging the European Union at this time. And I think this is not fair, because we accepted states that did their job not so good. And even in the time where Europe seems to work, we had things as a German looking to the Prime Minister of Italy, who can change the law just because he himself was a problem. This in Germany, then you know what. There's no way he would.
But that's precisely my point. I mean, that's
I got your point. Sorry,
Yeah.
just my way on. So I'm convinced there will be Europe. I'm very happy that these movements are there. I was very unhappy as long as these movements were not there, because it was a bad sign for our societies. In our society, then there was this feeling, oh, we can't do anything. It will all go its way. Europe, yes, what is Europe? It's there, it's fun to have it, but it was not really important for the people. Might be for the governments, but not for the people. And now to come into a public discourse with a yes and a no, that's something totally different. Whenever you decide then for a yes, you need arguments. And it's very hard to find arguments, for example, in the case of UK. Because UK has very good arguments to leave European Union. And what they are in the European Union is, sometimes they are really burden for the others because of their way they do the things, not really agreeing to Europe in any aspect. So every difficult situation we need a special condition for UK. That is not working. So I have no problem with becoming might be that we're losing one or the other. But at the end, that's another thing. I think there's no way out that all these countries will be a Europe. If the European Union will not be successful to manage it, or if the countries are not able to manage their problems inside of the European Union, that we will see. In the moment, I have the feeling if some of those countries where the movement is on the way that it might be successful, they have to pay, not the European Union. It's clear that, for example, UK, Germany pay much more than every other country, even if it has the same amount of seats in the parliament than the UK, but much more of the money is given by Germany. The UK had a long process to bring their money down to this position where they are now. UK get much more money in from the European Union than out. And what they will do, because just of this feeling of the people, because the situation in UK is difficult, as we all know. It's a Scottish question, it's the North Ireland question, it's the economical question. Even they can have problems to run the university in a proper way at the moment. We know these problems of UK, but if you then just give the bed to an institution a little bit far away, don't tell the people that this institution up to now helped you to survive and need a solution how to survive when you left it. I did not want to be a British politician at the moment, because I would know I have to win some for the European Union, and I know this is very difficult because in the British society they were not really aware of, for example, of the minority question. They were not really aware of
even in your
Scottish
country,
question.
there are very many angry people about Europe.
Yes,
I mean, against the Muslims, against the Greeks, against everybody. Marine Le Pen in France, Spain, the same thing.
yes, but wonderful that they are there.
Huh?
Wonderful that they are there. It's
Wonderful
really,
or not?
it really,
Yeah.
as long as these people were not raising their voice, there was nothing done in this direction. So no one in the governments really took care of the meaning of the opinion of the people. They did their solutions. And whenever the people were asked, the European Union had big problems. Look into Ireland, look into France, look into Norway, look into Denmark, look into Sweden. Wherever was a vote by the population, it was against the decision of the European Union. Just a very few exceptions. And that's very typical because this was not a policy done with and from the people, it was done from above. So I'm happy that these people are there, like I'm happy in Germany with these movements like Pegida and Legida. They will disappear soon, I'm sure, but it's good that they are there because they bring up a problem that was not discussed openly in the public. And this is the same thing as I said for the US or whatever. If you ignore a problem, if you don't go face to face with the real opinion of your people, what should come out? Your policy is for nothing. So I think it's good that it came up. It came up for some of the countries now too quick. For example, for UK, I think the problem with Greece is already solved. When you see the new government and how they act, I have no idea how such a politician can survive in this country. It's his problem, not mine. But I would be. It's a disaster. It's a political disaster. He announced those big things, and at the end, he's serving the European Union. What's this? But anyway, the problem in UK is more serious, and I think the biggest problem is that it came up now. I think it's good that the British people always have a serious hesitating towards Europe because it's their history. The British role in European history was always a special one. So whenever Europe came under pressure, World War II, Napoleon, World War I, we need the British there outside of the normal European continent so that they can act to rescue the rest of Europe. And this feeling is there, and I can understand this. It's their historical role. So there must be people who don't agree to Europe. But if these will be the majority, and if UK think they can so easily find the money somewhere else that they up to now got from the European Union, I think the Greek example shows it's an illusion. And then the conditions are much harder when it comes into being, because then you have to explain to people why you do things. The votes were against it. It's a disastrous task for politicians. I have no idea what they then will create as a story, but I know that was the reason why Brown last week, the former foreign minister in UK, raised up his voice against Cameron. But also Cameron, you have to say, it's just because he wants to win. It's nothing really substantial. And I don't like these games. I really think this is cheating the people, sorry.
Please, the last question, if somebody has.
Then I would have one.
Oh,
there is a
Ethnic minorities have the next question. So, what are the reasons for separatist movements or movements for autonomy within the European countries from the point of identity?
Say it again, please.
What are the reasons for separatist movements and movements for autonomy within the European countries from the point of identity?
Yes. It's first of all, the reason for all of these movements are that they feel themselves, it's right or not, that's a discussable thing, not enough in the view of the people where they are living in, the majority. The Basque have this feeling, the Northern Irish people have this feeling, the Scottish have this feeling. All of them really have the feeling, I'm a little bit ignored, my identity is not taken strong enough into account. Always we are dominated by the English, and I'm not English as a Scottish, so we call us United Kingdom, but in reality we are England. And I don't want to be England. I want to belong to UK, but I don't want to be a part of England. That's a long story in history between Scotland and England that brings this Scottish feeling into being, and for me it's right. This feeling is okay. There's nothing we have to say against this feeling. The question is, if they then want to be a member of the UK, and the UK wants the Scottish to have in the UK, the British, how you find a compromise for those things that are under question. How much Scottish history is in the school books, how much money is going to Scotland, how much independence you can give to Scotland. And we have this in any region in Europe where we have these tensions. The Basques, so they got autonomy, and you see, since the Basques got autonomy, the violence is much less. It came more and more out of being. And I think this is the only way, and we in Germany have now in the moment the experience, because we acted in that way to the GDR in the past, and it was at the end a success in a way. It's better, sorry, a very simple thing, but it's better to love the other person, to win, than to attack the other person. You will not win him at the end. You might be powerful enough to oppress him, but he will not love you. So the way is, if you are inviting enough, if you are open enough, and the question for the identity is, yes, if we come to a European identity as another level of identity than the national one, then they are very important. So I'm happy with these movements, because they show, no, there is not a united, unique, just monolith identity. It's a wonderful, colorful mixture of identities. And I want to have Scottish identity in the European Union. I don't want to have just the English one. I really respect English identity and whatever, but UK, it's including Scottish identity, Welsh identity, the identity of man, even from the Irish in Northern Ireland. If it's not including that, go away. So I can't say anything else than I'm happy with this, because this helps to encourage us to do these things better than we do it up to now. Nothing is ready for the eternity. Everything has to be done at every time new, and there were big gaps in European policy in the moment. And to bring the big gaps into the awareness of the people and the awareness of the politicians, that's nothing bad. And it's up to the politicians to convince the people that they really have a solution for. And this is sometimes not, can be better than we have it in the moment. But can I ask also a very simple question? So, because I'm in Russia for the moment, and this is my only opportunity to ask something like that. Two questions. Do you think that there is a special relation between Germany and Russia? This is the first question. And the second question would be, do you think that Russia can be a part of the European Union? But perhaps start with the first one.
You answer.
Do you think there is a special link between Germany and Russia? Ah, that's good to see. But why do you think this?
Historical background in their Russian and German relations.
Yeah.
Of course, and their operational elites and their I don't know, simple things like traveling. I think Germany was the most common place for staying for Russian aristocratic people, and it's a part of our culture. When we just open the book of Dostoevsky or I don't know, whatever, Turgenev, we will see there information about the Germany, and it's so related. I don't know. Even for example, the example of Lübeck. When you see there was a Turgenev who said to his friend that, oh, guy, you stay all the time in Russia, so you should go, even to Lübeck. He thought that Lübeck is kind of very difficult place, not like far away. That's why I think that example gives a lot. Even a Russian aristocratic person thinks that Lübeck is not so far and his friend should have some fun there. Not in Venice, not in Italy, somewhere, because that place is also was mentioned in many books or novels or whatever. He said about Lübeck.
Mm-hmm. I agree too, as you see. I'm really much a fan of the special relation of Germany and Russia. It's a love-hate relation. Most of the part in history. That's the bad part of this relation. But the good part of this relation is it was really strong, and they were very close, and they are still very close in their feelings and their lifestyle. But that's another thing. I'm very satisfied with these opinions. If there's another alternative opinion, I would take it also into account. But I saw already when I asked you if Russia can be a part of the European Union, you shook your head.
I think that we are a little bit different civilization. We can be good partners with the European Union, but we got different ways of development.
Yes. This is the political opinion of our Chancellor, for example. Always Russia, like Turkey, both are special partners, but we don't want to have them in. I'm not a friend of that, to say frankly. I don't see really a different way among the Russians. I see it in the political system, but that's another thing. I think when I'm looking where Russia can be at home, where Russia can feel as a real part of, I think also the European Union. So it belongs to China, so it belongs to the Middle East. No one in the neighborhood where you as a Russian with your history, of your ideas, of your philosophy, of your way of life, of your church, of your, even your socialist time, it's all coming from Europe or linked to Europe. Nothing is grown up here. It's Marx grew up in Germany as well as the Russian Orthodox Church is coming from Greek. So you are bound to Europe. All your leading ideas and a lot of your mentality is linked to Europe or Western way of life. If I'm going to the shops and into the supermarket, it's so different when I'm going to in the supermarket in India or Thailand or Japan. But your shops might be, they have different things, not the same things as we have in Germany, but they are organized in the same way as my shops in Germany. And I can't see why Russia should be so different. And I have the fear that a position as yours might be because when this time was over, when Russia was looking for it, they might be perhaps a part of the of the European Union, might be the Russians now take over the arguments by the Europeans who did not want, and that would be for me not good. So just in this case, but you must do your way anyway, but just in this case I would say, I know it's an illusion in the moment, it will not be possible in the moment, there are too much European countries who will never accept that in the moment because Russia is so big and so, it might be so difficult to handle and whatever. But my vision is the European Union with Russia as the biggest and strongest nation. But that's my vision.